please let the mayor in.
Jessica Battle, City Attorney's Office.
Stephen Fishback, CMPD.
Kimberly Owens, I represent District 6. I don't serve on the
Dante Anderson, committee chair.
Malcolm Graham, committee member.
Sean Heath, City Manager's Office.
Hi, everyone. Debbie Smith, Charlotte Department of Transportation.
Lisa Flowers, City Attorney's Office.
And we have some committee members online virtually as well. Go right ahead, Mr. Driggs.
Ed Driggs, District 7, and committee member.
Okay. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Chair. James Mitchell, Mayor Pro Tem, committee member.
Okay, so we have a pretty robust agenda today, so I'm just going to pass it over immediately to Attorney Battle and Major Fishbach to take up the topic of nuisance properties.
One moment, we're getting the slides pulled up. Thank you.
Okay.
As Councilman Bashmir is trying to get let in, I don't know who's handling it.
Yes, and please allow Ms. Ajmira to come in as well. Thank you, Ms. Ajmira, for joining. She is a committee member as well.
Yeah.
Should I wait until Ms. Ajmira gets on, or will we go ahead and begin?
I think you could go right ahead, and she'll jump in as well.
Okay. All right, good morning. So we are here today for an update on our last conversation about nuisance abatement. It's not working.
Okay, here we go.
I'm sorry, the clicker is not working. Thank you. All right, so we'll go over again legal authority. We'll talk about our ordinances. Then we'll take a general broad look at arcades, dance halls, and secular-oriented businesses, and also look at our current recommendations from the City Attorney's Office. And so as a reminder, a public nuisance or activity involving real property that amounts to an unreasonable interference with the health, safety, morals, or comfort of the community. Usually those look like things like breach of peace, possession and sale of alcoholic beverages or controlled substances, prostitution, and gambling. Some of these items are actually what we call nuisance per se, just because in themselves they cause a problem. Legal authority from the state comes from Chapter 19 of the North Carolina General Statutes, and then further 160A-174 allows cities to define and abate nuisances through their local ordinances. When we do look at the Charlotte City Ordinance, we turn to Chapters 3 and 10 of our ordinance. We looked at some of our sister cities in North Carolina to try to see what they were doing with nuisance matters at a local level. We compared Charlotte to Raleigh, Greensboro, Winston-Salem, and not to our surprise, we all have very similar nuisance ordinances. They aren't doing anything too much differently than we are. And so there are some different codifications there, but for the most part, the nuisance ordinances mirror each other. We also looked at CMPD's investigative and enforcement role, so we could look at their resource deployment and community engagement, and I will turn it over to Major Fishback to discuss those items.
So as we previously discussed, every division captain of a patrol division is held accountable for the crime and therefore the enforcement and proactive work that is being done in that patrol division. And so all the locations that we're talking about in terms of being a nuisance address, those are going to be very evident to that division captain, and they're going to be held accountable by their major to make sure that they're deploying patrol resources as well as their crime reduction units towards those locations and those situations. Now, on the Special Investigations Bureau side of the house, which I'm over, that's on me. I'm accountable, I'm responsible, I own the special investigative response to those locations. And when we talk about special investigations, we're talking about our plainclothes operations operating in that proactive space where we have a great deal of discretion as to where and how we deploy those resources. Now, I also want to add on there that we always want to start with partnership and collaboration with stakeholders and property owners. So a lot of times this starts off with education and resources that we're providing to the situation before we really even get into enforcement. And of course, that includes the partnerships with our nonprofits sponsored by the city, as well as like our CARES team. So a very multi-layered approach, holistic approach in terms of how we can address these situations and locations.
Thank you. Part of the proactive work, like Major Fishback mentioned, is also involved the city attorney's office becoming more proactive in CMPD's investigations and enforcement of nuisance matters. One of the things we looked at with the city attorney's office taking a more proactive role is not only comparing ourselves to sister cities and their nuisance ordinances, but seeing where any changes could be deemed more effective. I will mention that Boone, or the city of Boone, has codified parts of the Chapter 19 state nuisance laws into their city ordinances, almost like a copy and paste. I don't think that that's necessary for Charlotte to do at this time. I think what is necessary is for us to take that more proactive look at nuisance abasement and get that work done with the police department. Part of that includes a notice letter to nuisance properties, in addition to all of the notices that CMPD officers, whether it's community coordinators or our special investigation bureaus, provide to these businesses. The letter would be to sort of put those businesses and properties on notice that the city attorney's office is also involved and will take necessary legal action if the nuisances are not abated. And so part of that form letter, which is still in draft, you have the particular box where the city attorney's office would check which particular items of nuisance are occurring on that property. And then also finally at the bottom, that notice that if these nuisances are not abated or remedied, the city may seek to seize that property in order to abate the particular nuisance activity. When we look at this notice letter not as a sort of threat to any of the property or business owners, but more so to initiate an interactive process between the city and the property owner, in addition to what law enforcement is already doing. We also presume if a letter from the city attorney's office were to go to one of these properties, maybe they would get their legal counsel, if any, involved to help us to help them fix these nuisance matters on their property. And at the end of the day, in a reasonable amount of time, if these nuisance matters are not remedied, the city could proactively seek civil action, seeking abatement, and seizure of those properties. A reasonable amount of time would depend on the particular nuisance on that particular property. So there's no bright line time or number of days that we would use, but we would assess the work that is being done and whether or not improvements are being made, and obviously keep our law enforcement partners involved in that work so that we can all continue to meet and move forward in a hopefully positive direction. I do have one case study to briefly speak with you all about. Arlington Suites, that was on South Tryon Street. For several years, that area was a high crime area, what we would say in law enforcement. High volume of drug activities and violent crime on that property that was not remedied in what the city believed to be a reasonable amount of time. So the city attorney's office did file a civil action related to that particular property in order to abate the nuisances, that went on there. The complaint was filed against Arlington Suites at the courthouse in 2015, and the city was actually able to get an injunction in 2017. So that took about 2 years from the time it was filed in court to actually get that nuisance matter handled. And part of that final work ended up being the property owner selling that particular property. It took a long time, but when we tag in our other partners outside of the city attorney's office and law enforcement with CMPD, we also loop in our alcohol law enforcement where we can, in order to attack, I don't want to say attack, but address nuisance with as many teeth as we can. And so in that matter, the court did enter an abatement and permanent injunction against the property owner. The property owner then chose to sell that property, and it has been in a better state since that time. Some other nuisance businesses we wanted to highlight are arcades, dance halls, and sexually oriented businesses. It's important to note that the city attorney's office and law enforcement generally approach all properties in the same manner. There's not particular ordinances other than these listed here that address nuisance differently from a convenience store, let's say. But for arcades, those are governed by state statute for machines being prohibited by law and certain penalties. Dance halls are regulated under Chapter 160A of the state statutes, and the state also allows local municipalities to address dance halls. That's in Chapter 6, which is also where the state allows us to address adult businesses, some of those being what we call in our Charlotte ordinance, sexually oriented businesses. And I will note that under the law, arcades under state law are declared a public nuisance just on their face, no matter of any additional activity that may go on there. Same thing for sexually oriented businesses. State law states that these businesses can and do cause adverse secondary impacts on neighborhood property rates. And the state also goes on to talk about increases in crime, and they allow reasonable local government regulation in order to prevent adverse impacts on the community near those particular businesses. So that's kind of what we call nuisance per se, where the state's saying no matter any additional activities or whether violent crime or criminal activity occurs, these businesses on their face are nuisance properties. We had a question last month about arcades and the numbers, and so we pulled from January 1st, 2025 to present the numbers of aggravated assaults, possessions of marijuana, burglaries on those properties, robberies, theft of vehicles, and also larcenies from inside of vehicles, where people break in and don't take the vehicle but take property from inside. We looked at possessions of opium and cocaine, firearms incidents, and then other weapons includes things like knives and other sharp objects under those. And so obviously the firearm number is the higher here at 70, with also auto thefts and larcenies from auto following behind at 57 from January 1st to 2025. By division, we have our arcades here. I think North Division on the lower side, with Metro Division and North Tryon having the majority of arcades in their particular divisions. Central Division, Providence Division, and South Division do not have any arcades or fish games in their districts. And again, these divisions are about patrol divisions with CMPD. Dance halls and sexually oriented businesses, again, cause some level of nuisance per se, no matter additional criminal activity that may go on there. One of the potential enhancements that I spoke with Major Fishback and his team about was mirroring some state ABC laws, which are under Chapter 18B of our state laws, not mirroring the alcohol requirements because that is regulated by the state, but changing some aspects of inspections and permit revocations as it relates to those businesses, and also looking at after-hours service, sale, or consumption. Right now, our local ordinance prohibits after-hours service and sale of alcohol on the premises, but does not prevent consumption, meaning if someone already has a bottle in their particular section area, they could continue to drink, where under Chapter 18B, it looks at service sales or consumption after hours, so after that 2 a.m. When we're looking to potentially enhance our sexually oriented businesses and the revocations of those matters, we want to add some language and mirror language from our own dance hall ordinance that are not within our sexually oriented business ordinance. That includes breach of peace as a means for revocation. Right now, sale of controlled substances, sale of alcohol, those can call for revocation on sexually oriented businesses. But sometimes just a more general breach of peace and disturbance of public order, including homicides, affrays, assaults, communicating threats, those sorts of things, adding that to enhance the sexually oriented business revocation so that permits could be taken faster, and without a permit, these businesses shut down, and then the nuisance matter kind of takes care of itself from there. When we look at the law and when we look at our current city ordinances compared to state law, and even comparing dance halls to sexually oriented businesses, the city attorney's office currently has 3 recommendations. The first being to add required inspections of dance halls and sexually oriented businesses after initial permitting. That mirrors Chapter 18B of the Alcohol Beverage Control Statute by the state, Right now, those businesses have to be inspected prior to the city giving them their license or permit to operate, but we do not have any local authority to continue inspecting them. ABC could inspect them if the particular business has an ABC license, but if they don't, then there's no grounds for an inspection after someone has received their business permit. We would also recommend adding that non-compliance with an inspection could be grounds for revocation of that particular business's license. Second recommendation is to update the language regarding after-hours consumption of alcoholic beverages and add that to the dance hall and sexually oriented business ordinances. Again, that's similar to the Chapter 18B state law for ABC properties that state there is no sale, distribution, or consumption of alcohol after hours. And so adding consumption of alcohol after hours we think could be helpful here. And then also third recommendation is referencing that prior slide, updating the sexually oriented business grounds for revocation, adding some inspections, and adding breach of peace to a particular nuisance specifically for sexually oriented businesses to basically have dance halls and sexually oriented businesses mirror each other's requirements. So those are the recommendations we have at this point. Of course, we will take any questions and comments or additional research or work you'd like us to look into on this matter.
Thank you, Attorney Battle and Major Fishbach, for the presentation and the work. I'm going to open it up to the committee for questions. Any questions from the committee? Mr. Graham.
Another question, just a comment. Thank you very much for the presentation. I think what you laid out is exactly the approach that we need to take. Assertive, not aggressive, right? But I just want to reiterate the point I made at the last meeting, which is probably more of a planning issue, Ed, and I'll be speaking with the manager about it later this afternoon about, again, an ordinance related to vape shops on these corridors and the impact that they're having. James and I were on the email chain this weekend about yet another vape shop potentially coming to Beatties-Ford Road in an environment where there's one literally across the street, one literally 2 blocks away to the left, and several others several feet down the corridor. And we just need an ordinance, a distance ordinance. So if we can, Mr. Manager, really kind of drive that home for me. Again, I'm meeting with the manager this afternoon because I spoke with him last month about the same issue. I would love to see some action or some type of referral, something to that point.
I agree with Mr. Graham, and in addition to that, I think we need to even go a step further and perhaps draft some language around distance to K-12 schools and other establishments where children are, daycare centers, et cetera. So I second what Mr. Graham is saying.
Churches and universities.
Correct. Yes, we need a robust clause around where vape shops can conduct business. And I see Mr. Driggs has his hand up. Yes, Mr. Driggs.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was interested to see that homicide is included in breach of peace. Seems a little stronger than breach of peace, but anyway, my specific questions are, for one, around car noise as a nuisance. And I realize what we're talking about here is nuisance properties. So I guess my point is there are nuisance things that are on people's minds that are not necessarily attributable to properties. And the question is, what can we do about those? And I would include the car noise, the idea of the noise cameras that has been raised. And also, I still think that we have a perception of kind of lawlessness, I guess I'll call it, which is retail theft, it's panhandling, it's street racing, it's all of those things. And I consider those to be nuisances as well. So are we going to consider those, or is that outside of the scope of this current project, which I think is good, but I'm just wondering about some things that may not be covered.
I think, thank you, Mr. Driggs, for the question. I think under the traditional sense of nuisance and what state law anticipated along with our current ordinance attaches itself more towards a property and abating and seizing property. We do have an ordinance for loud mufflers, which I don't want to speak too much on behalf of Major Fishback, but when we get those calls for service, sometimes the issue is when police arrive at the area, that vehicle is gone. And so they would not be able to enforce the muffler in that instance because, as we all know, cars traverse through the city. With street racing, CPD does have the Scarlet unit that focuses heavily on street racing. They use crime analysis to get at these meetups. Recently, I was made aware that CPD did a community roll call in a particular business's parking lot where a street racing meetup was set to occur that particular evening. And photos from the community roll call where officers discuss things before they actually start their patrol shift. In those photos, you could see in that parking lot the donut marks from cars burning tires and all of those sorts of things. It was very effective, and obviously the particular meetup did not take place that evening. And so CPD is using its Scarlet unit and even its patrol units to support that. But traditional nuisance has been tied more to actual properties versus other areas of crime that, yes, they certainly are quality of life issues, but don't fall quite within the nuisance laws.
I get that. What I'm saying is I think it's good that we're looking at our authority under the nuisance laws, but the fact is for a lot of people, the big nuisance issues are, there was one instance in the news where they blocked a freeway, set fires, and raced, and nobody arrived for half an hour or 40 minutes, and they just had a big old party out there with their street racers doing the donuts and stuff. So maybe that's a new topic for us. I just want to note that I think for many people, we are missing a target by focusing only on the businesses. And the other thing I'll mention in that same context is in Waverly, for example, in my district, there is this group of young people that descends and hangs out, and it's getting in the way of their ability to conduct their business. It's causing legitimate clients not to come, frequent complaints to CMPD. We don't seem to have an answer for that. So that's another thing that I guess I would mention. And my last question is, how much of all of these issues is manpower related? I.e., do we have the staff capacity to actually aggressively implement these things, or do we run up against a shortage of that capacity?
I think for nuisance particularly, CPD has a NEST unit, nuisance enforcement unit, and I think that they are doing great work and they specifically handle nuisance matters across all divisions. On the other side of patrol for the street racing and those sorts of things, I don't want to speak on behalf of the sworn on the numbers on that. I don't know if Major Fishback had any input on that.
Sure. In terms of the street takeovers, which you're speaking of, the CMPD has a very intentional effort, which is blended between investigations, intelligence, and patrol divisions to address these street takeovers on the nights that we suspect and expect them to be taking place. And these are very robust plans, enforcement plans. And one of the things that has really been afforded to us by the state legislature is we can actually, based on observable behavior that we see people taking part in, seize their vehicles. And just to be frank, these vehicles are very expensive vehicles. It is not uncommon for us to be seizing vehicles between $50,000 vehicles and $100,000 vehicles. And that is really the teeth that we are able to use, because if we can take somebody's car that they're paying on and we hold that vehicle, that's what really hurts them there. But I can tell you that there's a very intentional effort on our part to address those street takeovers, knowing that you're exactly right. Those are often taking place late at night, early morning hours. They are very loud, they are very disruptive, and they can be very scary for other pedestrians or motorists on the highways and streets. So it's not lost on me. We do have that intentional effort there. In terms of manpower with the proposals that Ms. Battle spoke of, again, most of the heavy lifting would be done by the Special Investigations Bureau, and where the rubber meets the road is right here, right? And so I'm telling you, I'm committing to you that we would have the resources available to take action on these. We're not going to come to council and make these recommendations and not have a way to fulfill our end of it.
So Major Fishback, I would be the last person to criticize the CMPD. I hope you know that.
Sure.
But I also would not want to go out and tell some members of the public that we don't think that there's a need for us to do more. And so that's what I'm kind of thinking about right here, because as far as I can tell, based on recent input uptown on 485 and in various places around the city, this street racing is going on. That's why we're talking about the noise cameras right now. So appreciate everything you're doing. But like I say, I don't want it to look as if we think that there is nothing else we could be doing or should be doing.
Sure.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Driggs. Mr. Mitchell?
Madam Staff, can we go to slide 12? My question is going to be around kind of the arcade. And thank you, Attorney, for this slide. I think it's very helpful. One, kind of the number of cases and the categories, but then more important, the patrol division. So just two questions for me. One, how many have we closed over the past years, the arcades? And two, do we have any guidelines where they could be located? Because what I'm seeing, if there was a vacant Hardee's, if there was a vacant Jason's Deli, 7-Eleven store, we see the arcades moving in. So can we talk about, one, how many have we closed? And two, what are the guidelines for the arcades where they can be located?
So right now, we do not have any distance requirements for arcades, and so that's why, similar to vape shops, you might see some right beside each other or across the street. There have been some attempted seizures and some settlements that have occurred, many of them on the federal side. A lot of them because of the number of crimes, especially the more violent crimes, have been abated at a federal level. A lot of that has come to sometimes civil agreements with the federal government to sell the property to someone else. And so there have been success stories, and when we can tag on our federal partners to do so, we do get that done. The Arlington Suites one was one of the bigger success stories with the city of Charlotte.
Madam Chair, so to follow up, and just for my information, because we educate the citizens, so you had some people say that the state regulates arcade facilities, and so how much authority do we have local CMPD?
So the state does regulate arcades and makes them a nuisance just for being in existence. We can charge persons with possessions of the slot machines. To possess them is a crime, and to operate the business is a crime. And so our folks can do that in conjunction with prosecuting from the district attorney's office here, but we do not have any local authority for arcades. That all comes at the state level.
Gotcha.
And we've closed down 4 arcades in the last year. Now, that does not count. What we also come across is a convenience store that may have a few machines in it, and those machines are illegal. So that's not included in with that 4. So the additional peripheral, we'll say, convenience stores would probably be around 3 to 4 as well.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
So just to follow up on Mr. Mitchell's comment, so we don't have any local jurisdiction over arcades. Do we have the possibility to draft language around the location of arcades at all?
Right now, I think the state does not give us authority to actually regulate arcades, I believe that would include any zoning requirements on that, because that would be in essence regulating them, which the state hasn't given us authority to do. I know specifically we can do that with other businesses if we wanted to change those zonings, and I will check into whether or not we could do that with arcades, but I believe because we can't regulate them, it might be difficult for us to have different zoning requirements.
Okay, I think it would be great for us to have another level of clarity on that. We have the pleasure of having the chair of the BGIR committee, and that might be something that we want to take, to the state level, to some of our colleagues at the state level to further investigate. I have Ms. Owens.
Thank you, Madam Chair, I appreciate it. I just had a couple of questions, if I could park on this train of thought a little bit longer on what we can do and what we cannot do. I too had in my notations around vape shops. Are vape shops looked at more similar to the arcade situation? Are they more similar to an ABC store type of, like what are we seeing on the horizon with respect to regulation of vape shops? And what can we credibly do? Because that's something that I do get asked in my jurisdiction is folks are interested in those being regulated.
So vape shops are also regulated at the state level. I don't think they quite fit into the arcade scenario, nor, I guess, closer to the ABC scenario where you're selling a product that is a controlled substance of sorts, being the legalized hemp products. And so at the state level, they create all of those current regulations. But likewise, I will look into that to see if the state prevents us from instituting zoning requirements versus the actual regulation of the substantive business, because that could be different layers that we might actually be able to regulate distance and zoning versus the actual substantive operation of the business and the sale of the products. As far as criminal investigations, right now there's not a way to test the particular amount of THC in some of the products at these stores, so there's not a guaranteed way currently to test whether or not these shops are truly selling legalized hemp products, which are less than 0.03% THC, versus selling actual illegal marijuana products. But our officers are certainly investigating those businesses and taking criminal enforcement action where applicable.
Madam Chair, with your indulgence, one more question. So I just want to follow on, again, that train of thought with respect to some of the festivals and street vendors and things. I do see a lot of those hemp products being sold there as well. And so are we looking at it merely in the context of vape shops, or are we looking at it also in the context of sort of these sales that are outside of vape shops? And I put that out there because I don't actually know the answer, but that is something that I get inquiry around.
We do see that as it relates to street vendors. From time to time, street vendors will sell hemp products. We've seen it in Noda and other communities such as South End as well. So, Major Fishbach, do you have any comment?
Two parts with that. In terms of the vape shop investigations, I'm going to speak very broadly. In partnership with our federal partners, we look at mostly the wholesalers with that to try to stop the product from even getting into Charlotte, Mecklenburg, these large shipments. Again, we do run into all the problems that Ms. Battle spoke of in terms of what is that percentage of THC in the product. But for the first part, we try to keep it from even getting into Charlotte, Mecklenburg, and then trickling down to the retail level. For the second part, again, that's where I would speak to the community and everyone in this room. If you know of or suspect of a specific vendor in a festival, street vending type situation, that's where the police department has got to be contacted, that information passed along. I can tell you, myself and CM Anderson worked a situation together in Noda, which the police department would have had zero knowledge of a specific vendor over there. Had it not been from the voices and the information coming from the community to us, we were able to deploy resources, some of those resources from the Special Investigations Bureau, that resulted in a significant drug arrest and seizure, which removed that vendor from that location.
Absolutely, and I appreciate your partnership on that. Thank you, sir. There are a couple things just in attorney battle. I know that we have had this discussion, but some of the issues that plague the entire city, it's peppered throughout the entire city. One is motels that are effectively day motels, weekly motels that are harbingers of prostitution and illegal narcotic sales. I get the complaints. I know CM Graham and CM Mayo and others get the complaints around their districts. But what's our ability to address those nuisance properties that just drain our CMPD resources?
So under state law, hotels can offer hourly rates, which I know sometimes creates the nuisance issue that we are speaking of, and the intention of anyone renting a hotel or motel room with an hourly rate. These are generally legal so long as they don't violate any zoning, health regulations, or otherwise the safe operation of the business. So while municipalities cannot regulate the fees and rates that the hotels charge, we certainly can regulate the locations and zoning of hotels and other short-term rental facilities. Short-term under state law means less than 90 days. 90 days or above, if someone were to stay somewhere, they'd be considered a tenant, whether it were a motel or another residential property. But we can institute zoning requirements and things in distance as it relates to our hotels and motels.
Okay. And the second part of my question is around, and we've heard this, we've seen this topic before in committee, but the convenience stores that allow loitering and, again, illegal drug sales, et cetera, that have high CMPD calls. What's our ability to address those nuisance properties through the process you are recommending?
We can absolutely regulate those or attempt to seize those properties through abatement. What it looks like from the practical side is officers are constantly investigating and updating the NEST unit. Our team with the attorney's office is involved with CMPD's NEST unit to keep track of these nuisances. And once it reaches a level where we believe we could successfully abate, we could take civil action. But again, prior to that, that's where we have that notice letter from the city attorney's office that goes out. Last summer, I had a couple of meetings with Mr. Graham where we were looking at things in the Beatties Ford, Catherine Simmons area, and the loitering. It's several businesses and properties right in that little nook that we were looking at. There was heavy involvement with CMPD reaching out to the property owners. One thing properties owners can do is to sign an authority to act as agent form, which means when the business is closed, CMPD can go to that property and ban people and tell them they need to leave and trespass them. Without an authority to act as agent form, a person from the business would have to be present and ask a trespasser to leave. And so those forms are very helpful when the business is closed, after hours, people hanging out or intending to go to sleep for the night. CMPD, they know there's an authority to act as agent at that property. They can go through and tell everyone to clear out. And if they do not clear out, they could be charged. We had actually a letter ready to go to Nikki's, which is a food establishment over that way. But due to our very helpful community coordinators in the Metro Division, I mean, I rode with officers out there. I drove past there and we saw the numbers going down and we had less people loitering. So I think that involvement in that sort of interactive process certainly helps. There's a residence over that way where one of the owners is from out of state, in a completely different time zone, and she will watch her cameras and call CMPD to let them know, hey, some folks are loitering, or I might see drug transactions on my Ring cameras on my property. She also has an authority to act as agent. Officers can come out and clear those folks. There are some local owners of property in that area, to our surprise, who aren't as helpful in the interactive process. And so we are actually currently in the process of getting a notice letter out to a particular property out there where officers have attempted several times to interact and engage with that property to abate the nuisance. It's a residential property, and the property owner lives in Mecklenburg County. And so it just depending on the particular level of involvement of the property owner can really kind of tell us which final direction these issues would go through, whether it's convenience stores or other things like that, Beatty's Ford, Catherine Simmons area.
Okay. I know you already know this, but I'm just going to add to your list Reagan Drive, Sugar Creek as well. A high volume of properties that you are describing. I have Ms. Owens for a follow-up, and then I have Ms. Ajmira.
Just very briefly, can you give me a greater feel for where we would have leverage to be more forceful in encouraging someone to execute an act as agent form? Are there circumstances, are there a number of calls that can happen, or there's just a number of interactions in an area where we could be a bit more forceful in that so that the police had something else to enforce? Thank you.
There's no bright line number for calls for service or a level of crime that would trigger that. It's something that we typically empower our community coordinators to do, to speak with those business owners and kind of remind them this is a helpful tool for you, because when you are not at your business after hours, we certainly will drive by and do zone checks to make sure, someone isn't loitering, attempting to break in. So we try to bridge the gap that way, but there's no particular level. It could be one homicide that triggers a conversation from a community coordinator to get that authority to act as agent form versus, a few lower level loitering calls or disturbance calls. So no bright line number, but we certainly engage when we can, but we don't have a legal remedy to sort of require anyone to get the authority to act as agent.
I would like to see perhaps a more aggressive outreach in business areas where we can anticipate, and we can give them that in their toolbox even before there are problems, that we've got a signed act as agent form. So thank you.
Ms. Ajmira.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. A couple of questions I have. Before I ask some of my questions, I wanted to follow up with you, Ms. Battle, on Councilmember Owens. Can we explore what Councilmember Owens suggested, being proactive and supporting some of our businesses who might be a target in some of the situations?
Yes, I would echo the answer to Councilmember Owens that our community coordinators do a really good job with that. And even the involvement is so good that captains who lead those divisions also do their best to form relationships with the property owners and the staff, and will, just go chit chat and ask what their needs are. So our sworn partners certainly are doing their best with that, and, constantly offer the authority to act forms to help us help them sort of manage their property and the crimes and things that are occurring.
So I wanted to follow up on that because we have heard from certain small businesses that have struggled, where they want to be able to partner, but they haven't been able to get the level of support. And I'm not sure if it's because of the staffing, but Major, I would like to touch base with you afterwards in terms of what the capacity looks like, and if there is a way that we can sustain that increased level of support for some of the small businesses. And I'm happy to connect you with some who have reached out and have expressed concerns.
Absolutely.
Second, do we have a city planner in the meeting or anyone from the planning?
No, ma'am.
No, we
Yeah.
don't have anyone from the planning department here, Ms. Ajmira.
I think, Madam Chairwoman, it would be helpful to have city planner as we are looking at some of the planning and zoning tools that we can leverage to address some of the concerns, whether that's arcade shops, whether that's vape shops. Certainly in terms of we can explore options at the state level, but I'd be interested in hearing directly from our planning team, what can we do in the short term to address issues around arcades and vape shops, because they
Yes.
do tend to target some of the most vulnerable members of our community, as I had mentioned at our previous meetings. And we have seen some of the arcade shops tend to be a magnet for crime that happens in our communities.
Yes, I myself and Mr. Heath will pass that on. Mr. Heath, would you like to make a comment?
Yes, I'll be brief. I just wanted to acknowledge that I believe Planning Director Monica Holmes has mentioned from the chamber recently that there are a few quote-unquote emerging land uses that are on the horizon for them. Right now, the focus is on data centers, which we'll hear more about tonight, but she's explicitly mentioned vape shops, and she and I have talked about vape shops and how can they take into consideration from a planning regulation standpoint what additional can be done. So I will follow up with her directly on that.
Absolutely, and we have the pleasure of having the chair of the Transportation and Planning Committee on our committee, Mr. Driggs, so I'm sure he'll pass that along as well.
Yeah, and I think it would be helpful, Madam Chairwoman, to have a memo from our city planner in terms of what tools do we currently have to help address some of the issues around arcade shops as well as vape shops, similar to the memo we have received from the attorney's office on data centers. I think it's good to have a memo telling us some of the tools in our toolbox. Lastly, I also wanted to also support what Councilmember Driggs mentioned around street takeovers, because that is not unique to certain parts of our city. That's an issue we are seeing across the city. Certainly, what we know that there needs to be some changes at the state level, but what I would like to see what we can do at the local level. And that's certainly, I think, a topic that we need to have a specific, just a focused conversation on street takeovers, because noise cameras would certainly be a solution, but that doesn't necessarily, it's not necessarily a proactive solution. I think we need to be proactive in addressing that before those incidents happen. So what tools do we have? I'm not clear on. And so I would like to have a more focused conversation on that. And that's all I have. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman.
Thank you. If we don't have any other comments from the committee, I think we will pivot on to our next topic. I'm sorry? So the committee member just spoke about potentially voting on the recommendations. It sounds to me, and committee, keep me honest here, but it sounds to me like we had some additional ask from both Attorney Battle and Major Fishbach to perhaps expand the recommendations where possible. And I heard Attorney Battle say there's some opportunities to investigate further and come back. So if Mr. Heath, if you are amenable to this, I say we bring this back in the June meeting. And my goodness, am I saying June already?
Yeah, I'm saying June.
Wow,
Yeah.
that's crazy.
Yeah.
But in the June meeting with a tightened, perhaps more robust list of recommendations for the committee to vote on, take action on, and advance to broader council. Does that sound good, committee?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. All right, with that, we shall move on to our second agenda topic, which is red light cameras.
Great, thank you, Chair, and thank you to Janine for helping to tag team this presentation on. We are continuing the conversation from our April meeting, and so just as a reminder, this is a policy referral item should the City of Charlotte pursue the reinstatement of red light cameras. And so today we're going to talk a little bit more about best practices for red light camera programs, the cost of implementing those programs, and potential locations. Next slide. So at our last conversation, we walked through for you the enabling legislation and ordinances With the assistance from the city attorney's office, and apologize, Lisa Flowers needed to go to another appointment, so if you have any questions, I can take those back to her. But with the assistance from the city attorney's office, we confirmed that there are at least 2 avenues for us to reinstate this red light camera program. One additional bit of information from last meeting is that we've learned that there was a local act passed in 2007 that allows for us to charge $75 for the fines. Next slide, thank you. Best practices, there's approximately 350 communities across the United States that have active red light enforcement programs. And the more successful programs are really following these best practices and elements in their programs. They're aligning with their Vision Zero goals using a data-driven approach. They are prioritizing the high injury network locations. They're using crash type, frequency, and severity to guide the deployment. And when we say crash type, we mean those angle type crashes or left turn roadway types of crashes. When we talk about the frequency and severity, the severity are fatal and serious injury crashes. And then the last item on that list is maintaining data transparency and reporting frequently. So here we have some potential sites that over the last 5 years on the high injury network, we have 39 signalized intersections, and that's what those yellow dots on the map show. So 39 signalized intersections that have had at least 1 fatal crash. This list was further refined using the information of the higher percentage of angle and left turn different roadway collisions, pedestrian and bicycle collisions, and higher overall numbers of collisions. And using that additional lens, next click, these are the 10 locations that we have found would be based on that additional criteria. So 10 locations around the area, and that shows about 1,841 collisions over that 5 years. That represents 26 fatal and serious injury collisions, and 220 of those were the angle and left turn different roadways. So the types of crashes that we would expect red light cameras to remedy. And of those 10 sites, 24 pedestrian and bicycle collisions. Next slide. So let's talk about engineering solutions that increase safety at signalized intersections. Some low-cost opportunities that we have are installing LED signal indications, but what I can tell you is of the about 1,000 signalized intersections that we have citywide, nearly all of those have already been changed out to LED. We use standard practices to do signal timing. So our yellow phase of the signal time is based on nationally accepted practices. So we do that today. And then the last on that list is reflective backplates. And I actually have a little bit of a show and tell. And so if you wondered what a reflective backplate is, it outlines the traffic signal and just makes it more visible for folks that may not see the traffic signal. Sometimes it, believe it or not, gets lost in the sky and people are running red lights because they weren't seeing it. So we have deployed that at some locations, but not all. So we have that opportunity to do that. High-cost improvements, though, from an engineering solution are dedicated turn lanes, intersection reconstruction, and making sure that the intersection itself is very visible. Higher cost means longer lead times as well. But I want to point these out really to just identify that in many circumstances, the problem that we're working with is really driver behavior, not engineering solutions. So looking at the financial analysis for those 10 intersections, we're looking at approximately $5,000 per month per intersection. So an initial first cost program would be about $600,000. We estimate that based on a $75 per citation revenue, that looking at just an assumption around 500 citations per month. And I'll tell you, we really looked at that just average based on what our peer cities were experiencing. No other magic number than that. So we were estimating that around $4.5 million annual revenue. And if we were to use the 90% of that revenue going to Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, and 10% of that being the city share to run the program, the administrative, it breaks down as $4.05 million to CMS and $450,000 to run the city program. So the additional cost there would be the $150,000 to run that program. We took a look at using the Federal Highway Administrative Benefit Cost Analysis tool, because a really good question that I know you all were asking was, can we, how would a red light program work in terms of benefits? And what I can say is that it would have significant benefit. We looked at the annual number of crashes that we experience today without the program, looking at the number of serious and fatal injury collisions and that type of crash. And then we looked at it with installing a program, and we would expect to see about a 50% reduction in those types of crashes. And I can tell you that it would be difficult to achieve these kinds of outcomes with any other countermeasure. So really lending itself to being a positive benefit. So just recapping with the committee, option one would be a city-funded program using the existing statutory approvals, where the city would pay for the program up front. We would take 90% of that citation and pay that to Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, utilizing 10%, so that would be $7.50 of each citation for program expenses. The other option would be mirroring what Charlie talked about at our last meeting, is perhaps pursuing General Assembly action to do a greater cost share. That's some of the other ordinances and General Assembly actions have been in a cost share model. So if we were to pursue option two, that would be the city could provide all that citation revenue to Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, and then the city would invoice actual program costs and reimburse. So next steps would be answering any committee questions, any further discussion. And Chair, if you and the committee decide, you could take a vote today and advance either one or both options. And I am happy to answer questions around that.
Thank you, ma'am. I have Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Debbie, thank you so much for the presentation. Just two quick questions for me. So this is based on the 39 intersection with fatal collision, this program, the
It would
cost?
be narrowed down, sir. It would be based on the 10.
The
So,
10.
Yep, it would
Okay.
be 10, launching 10 initially.
Where are the 10? Have we selected the 10?
Yep, if we go back to slide 5, Janine. It doesn't show up in your hard copy.
Yes.
Right.
Yes.
I believe it's slide 6, maybe?
Yeah,
It's
here we
right,
go.
yeah, with the orange.
Click, yep, there we go.
Okay.
So Mr. Mitchell, Councilman Mitchell, when we looked at sort of a further analysis, we selected 10. Those 10 locations on the screen are Graham Street and Norris, University City Boulevard and the I-45 or I-85 ramp, Steel Creek and Westinghouse, North Tryon and University City Boulevard, Central Avenue, Sharon Amity, W.T. Harris, North Tryon, South Tryon, Arrowwood, South Mount West Boulevard, Central Avenue and Kilbourne, and 36th in the Plaza. So that's the 10.
Of course.
So we can send you those.
Yeah, I think it'd be helpful, Debbie, even for the viewers, because we see them here, they're not in our presentation.
Sure.
And so it'd be nice, and if you could, put them by district, because I think it's
Got it.
important, we have heard this is a citywide issue, so be able to say which 10 and what district they belong in.
Perfect.
And Debbie, take me back to slide 9, because I've been around long as dirt, but I'm starting to forget things. So initially, when we first set up this agreement way back, I think it was on the Mayor Fox.
It was way back.
Yeah,
Yes, sir.
Mayor Fox. And so the original interlocal agreement had us giving 90% to CMS, so that is not changing. This is the same.
Not change.
Okay, got it.
Exactly that same scenario. Yes, sir.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And just as a follow-up on that, the option 2 would allow for the coverage of all the operational costs,
It
right?
would, yes,
And that's
ma'am.
due to the activity that has gone on in the courts in recent years, right?
Correct,
Okay.
correct.
So option 2 of Mr. Mitchell will allow us to cover all the costs operationally, invoice CMPD, I'm not CMPD, but CMS for that.
Okay.
Whereas option 1 is just that hard 10%, and it may not cover all the operational costs.
That's correct.
Okay, gotcha. I have Ms. Ashmere.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. A couple of questions. Debbie, could you explain how were these 10 intersections were determined?
Absolutely, Councilman Ajmira. Thank you for that question. Those 10 started from pulling together the intersections that had fatal injury, or a fatality on the high injury network, and that's where the 39 intersections first were selected. Then, based on peer city and best practices, we looked at where did those locations have a higher incident of angle-type crashes or left turn different roadways, really essentially where are the places where we were seeing the red light running. Then we looked at where there were pedestrian and bicycle crashes and just higher number of overall collisions, and it was that additional criteria that got us to the 10.
Got it. So in the memo that you will be sending, that Councilmember Mitchell had requested, by district intersection, could you also include this determination criteria so we understand? Did we consider cameras, especially around schools?
In this case, we did not use schools as a defining criteria, not to say that we can't, we just didn't in this first request.
So is this how other cities have done when they have placed red light cameras?
Yes, ma'am, it is.
Okay,
Very
so this
similar.
is best practices.
Yes.
This is part of best practices. Okay. Madam Chairwoman, what I would like to see is we implement option 1 while we also explore option 2, because option 2 is more long-term. That's going to require us going to the General Assembly. So in the meantime, I do believe we need to implement option 1 to eliminate major traffic fatalities we are seeing in our communities.
Ms. Smith or Attorney Battle, could you just provide a follow-up on what option 2 would actually entail in terms of action steps?
Mm-hmm. Sure, and so I hate to put Jessica on the spot.
Absolutely, yes, I would.
That's why I named both of you. Whoever wants to take it.
Tag team.
So with these local amendments, we've had them done in various areas of state law in Charlotte for different needs and things, but yeah, it requires reaching out to them and they would vote and draft and add a local amendment. But for next time, are we thinking June to have an actual full practical sort of workflow of how that would do?
Yes.
Yep,
Yeah.
I will make sure.
Because I think it would be helpful for the committee, but also the public to understand the action steps and the nuances of option 2. Certainly, we want to take action, as Ms. Ajmira just mentioned, but it would be beneficial to understand how we can get all of the operational costs covered through option 2. Ms. Ajmira, did you have a follow-up question?
No, that was great. I appreciate you asking for the process because you're right. It is not an easy process to get option 2 done. And certainly having Mr. Graham as part of the safety committee who chairs the BGIR committee can certainly help us with option 2 in terms of adding it to our legislative agenda as needed. But yeah, I appreciate you clearing that.
Okay. Mr. Driggs, did you have a comment?
I did, thank you, Madam Chair. On the General Assembly, I agree the better model is the one where we have full cost recovery. In practice, we would need to get a member to actually sponsor the bill. I mean, that's the way it works. Somebody would have to run the bill. It is a procedure. We need to think about where they are in their work process and what are we talking about in terms of when we hope that any action by them would be effective, and would we intend to wait until then to proceed? And so therefore, I agree it may be that we start out with one. The legislators will probably look at two and wonder whether we're trying to create a money source for ourselves by inflating the expenses. And hate to be negative, but I'm just saying the environment is such that I don't know about the politics of that. But that is something that we, unless we are okay waiting until we have success with two, I think we need to look at one for sure. And I was curious too about the 10 locations. What's the significance of the number 10 exactly? You had 39 intersections at which there was a fatality. What I'm worried about is us doing some sort of calculation involving tens of thousands of dollars, and there are lives at stake. We don't want to put a price on a human life, although we often implicitly do. But how did we limit ourselves to 10 for this project?
Mr. Driggs, I believe we just were asked at the last committee meeting to cost out what it would be to stand up a pilot that included around 10 locations.
But this would be a pilot, right?
Yes.
And therefore, the idea would be that we will consider, based on the results of the pilot, expanding the program.
Absolutely, sir.
I mean, I noticed since we talked about districts, it doesn't look like there's one intended for District 7, but won't get bogged down with that. I was interested, in the past, we've considered this issue a couple of times, and the takeaway was that the benefit of these cameras was actually in question somewhat. So what has changed? And I don't know if you remember, but we looked at this. We have looked at this before and weren't able to reach a conclusion that they did enough good to justify it. Now, obviously, there's a money dimension to this, but also, are they effective? I think from what you told us, and I was trying to remember the slide that has the actual casualty reduction on it.
Yeah, Mr. Driggs, it has a pretty high benefit to cost, and I will tell you what's different in Charlotte is that we are seeing more of those angle crashes, red light running, resulting in serious injury and fatals. That's what's different.
So
Can we go to
basically,
slide
because of-
8, actually, where the numbers are, Mr. Driggs? I think that might be helpful. That's the slide you're referring to.
And at page 8, yeah. I mean, I guess we would make the case then that the situation has gotten worse because of increases in traffic and more aggressive driving behaviors. So we have annual crashes without treatment 1.6, and that is for all of the 10 intersections?
Yes, it is, sir.
And
Just
that
at
comes
this.
down to less than 1. So, and the cost of the whole program again?
The cost, yes, about $600,000. Estimated cost, once again, that was based on talking to vendors that are deployed in other areas. So $600,000 is the cost of 10 intersections, and we would be covering about $150,000 of city-only funding.
Yes, based on that cost recovery model. But then, as we look in general at the cost of the program, we're going from 1.6 serious injury and fatal collisions, which are not necessarily fatalities, to some number less than 1. It'd be kind of interesting to know, to the decimal point, what are we talking about less than 1?
Yeah. I can get you that information, Mr. Driggs.
So, because what I'm saying here is, if it was 0.8, for example, and therefore you had a 0.8 reduction, then you'd be spending, you could be spending $800,000 to $1 million for each collision that you actually prevented with this program. And that's where we get into the difficult area of life and death calculations. But that strikes me as a very high cost in terms of the reduction in collisions. And I would always argue that maybe we can use that money in Vision Zero to save lives more productively. I'm not sure this is the best way to improve safety at that cost. Now, again, recognizing a lot of the money is coming from the people paying tickets, so we don't have to, but I still think that commitment of resources is something that needs to be justified. And I would really like to know what that decimal place is in the second thing there, because there is a calculation that says, okay, it's less frequently than once a year. It's every 15 months or 18 months on average that you prevent a collision in 10 intersections. And you're taxing the public through tickets, $600,000 or no, whatever, the amount that we would taxing them. And maybe you have an impact on our city budget. And so I'm not fully convinced yet that the calculation justifies it. And again, I emphasize, if we don't spend the money this way, my thought would be that we think in terms of Vision Zero and other ways to invest and achieve better results in terms of improved safety. Thank you.
Ms. Smith, just for clarity, the 150K that you have on slide 7, that would be the uncovered cost of the program effectively, that the city would be bearing the brunt of. That is a monthly cost?
No, that is an annual estimate.
Okay.
Annual.
So, Mr. Driggs, that is an annual cost that the city would be carrying the brunt of 150K annually to have the impact that you see in terms of slide 8, in terms of reducing.
I understand that, Madam Chair, but what I'm saying is the people of Charlotte will be paying through these citations. They will also pay a lot in insurance costs and the other consequences of receiving citations. So it's not costless. And again, we want to make sure that if we introduce this, that we're seeing a change in accident rates that warrants, because obviously we do want to discourage people. It's annoying for the public to see people driving right through red lights. It annoys me too, but I just think we need to be objective here. Those citations, each one of those citations is probably going to result in a big increase in insurance costs for the people that get them. And so I think we need to impose that burden thoughtfully. Obviously, people don't have sympathy for somebody who runs a red light. When you're dinged for $1,000 a year or whatever it is more on your insurance premium because you ran through a light, then the question, and the citation, the question is whether that was the right outcome. So for my own personal conclusion, I'll just be looking a little closer at the kind of economics of this, as I say. And yes, it's $150,000 to the city. But on the other hand, if the program works well, then we are talking about widening it, and therefore, depending on what we think the scale needs to be after a successful trial period, the cost to the city is, in other words, why have a trial if you're not going to be willing to expand the program? And we need to think in terms of how much money that would cost the city. And how many citations, everything, scale it up by a factor, a multiple. And that's where we would be heading. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Driggs. Ms. Smith, I think you started originally with the 39 intersections, right? And so this being 10, I think we can do a multiplier effect, Mr. Driggs, to think about, if successful during a pilot, how the costs would multiply just based on those 39 intersections. Attorney Battle, you had a comment?
Yes, Madam Chair, thank you. I just wanted to clarify that any tickets issued by the red light camera are civil in nature, so they would not go on anyone's DMV driver history. It's a civil fine paid through the city of Charlotte, and it is my understanding that we do not have any connection that would make that information available to insurance or otherwise. It would not be on someone's driver history were they to get pulled over by a police officer and get a criminal citation, versus these have authority for civil citations.
Thank
So
you.
this is like a parking ticket.
Yes, correct, absolutely.
All right, didn't know that. Thank you.
Thank
That's
you for the
important.
clarity.
Yes.
Ms. Smith, one more question before I go to Councilmember Owens. On slide 9, where we have option 1, we are talking about the 10 intersections, but is there a time aspect for the pilot that you are proposing?
We would love to come back and propose something along those lines. Wanted to get feedback from the committee today.
Okay. Because I think just speaking with committee members,
Yeah.
there's an appetite to take
Yes.
action
Take action,
today
right.
to advance option 1 while we are doing the work for option 2, which has a longer runway. But we wanted to understand if you had a temporal aspect that you're recommending, or if we need to suggest a 6-month period, et cetera.
Would love to hear your feedback. Would love to engage with, some of the peer cities that maybe did it as an initial pilot to see what makes sense for that initial pilot, because it would be a proposal process.
Yes.
And so want to make that a meaningful proposal process to any proposer.
Okay.
to come
We're
in.
going to go with CM Owens, and then we'll come back with Mr. Mitchell.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just had 4 quick comments and just want to put out into the room. I had raised on one of our other sessions the possibility of what signage goes up and whether we can have locations that are perhaps the other 29 that we're not covering that say that you may be under, I just, that dupe, I think, does drive some psychological behavior that is perhaps different. And so I would like to throw that out into the room as well, that we consider areas that are, advertising that we've got them, but also advertising places where we don't yet have them, but could potentially shift them to those locations just to, again, drive behavior. Another question that I did want to put out into here was, you referenced the civil citation amount of $75. When was that set, and what are the parameters for setting that? Is there appetite to perhaps explore that being a higher amount so that we could offset more of the cost if we propose option 1?
Yeah, Councilwoman Owens, that's a great question. So Session Law 2007-341 is the local act, including Charlotte, that increased fines to $75. There were a couple of session laws where the combination of the local act also increased fines. So option 2, if we were going to General Assembly, could possibly be the path in which we increase the fines greater than 75.
Okay, so to discuss that, thank you, I appreciate that. And then the third item that I had a question about, and actually, I have read this, but I haven't heard this from anybody within the city, so it lacks credibility. Are the noise camera and red light camera, are there companies that do both so that while we are exploring that, there are some synergies or some cost-effective savings that we could get if we do pursue noise cameras, for example? Can we offset some of that cost?
We have talked to a company that proposes and has the capability to do both. So I'm aware of at least one company that does that. But beyond the ability to do noise cameras, I really would want to lean into the attorney's office expertise there.
Understood. And then finally, I just, and Councilmember Anderson will appreciate the heart space from which this is coming. I've just traveled someplace where she's been as well, where there are no traffic signals and there are just roundabouts. And I think we all know that roundabouts are much safer. They get a bad rap because they do take a lot of engineering planning and they take a lot of space to do. But to Councilmember Driggs's point, if there's a longer term, more in engineering style, I find, and I'm just going to again put this out into the room for folks, is we're looking at the amount of money that's going to be coming in with the PAVE Act. I would like to see us in places really approaching longer term solutions that are not so reliant on technological assistance and are more geared literally towards an engineered solution that drives fewer of the T-bone style wrecks that do yield some of these fatalities. So thank you for your indulgence.
Thank you. Mayor Pro Tem.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Staff, thank you for the presentation. I think sometimes we as council, we get labeled that we take a long time to take action. And I think this is a great opportunity for us to take action today. We've heard loud and clear from the citizens who would like for us to look at this program. I remember back in the days it was successful for us. back in 2008. And so, Madam Chair, I would like to make the recommendation, make a motion to go with option one and put the pilot at 1 year for the 10 locations, and then option two would proceed and get feedback from my BGR in this committee of getting General Assembly feedback. So that's the motion, Madam Chair.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion from Mr. Mitchell and a second from Ms. Ajmira.
Madam Chair?
Yes, Mr. Driggs.
I'm just concerned about where we are in our budget cycle and how we come up with $150,000 depending on the effective date. So I think you did mention the budget chair, but I'm pretty sure the manager's position will be that we have to divert that money from somewhere else if we want to introduce this. And which we'll do. I'm happy to vote for it, but just pointing that out.
Okay, I have Ms. Smith here. Thank you.
Yeah, I would love to be able to let you know that as part of the Vision Zero program, we would be able to look at funding that pilot through the Vision Zero program.
Okay.
So,
Fantastic.
From available resources.
Fantastic.
Yes, Mr. Driggs, from available resources
Okay,
through the
good,
Vision
good.
Zero program.
Okay.
Okay.
Aye.
All right, I have a motion and a second. Hearing no further discussion, all in favor, raise your hands or say aye virtually.
Aye.
All right. Mr. Driggs, are you an aye?
I'm an aye, yes.
Okay, so that passes 4 to 0, so wonderful. Excellent, thank you, and thank you, staff, for the work. I think as was said by Mr. Mitchell, this is clearly an action that we are advancing and recommending to the larger council very quickly to address these issues with safety in our community.
Madam Chair.
Yes, sir.
I am trying unsuccessfully to move from my computer to my city phone in this meeting because I need to get in my car and head uptown. So I'm going to have to drop off, I think, because I do need to be uptown. So sorry to miss the last presentation, but I have to check with technology and find out why I can't see this on my phone. Anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. And for our third agenda item, we made a commitment earlier this year that we would create space for our boards and committees that our citizens very eagerly and tirelessly volunteer to help the city and the county move forward. Give them space. And in this meeting, we have the pleasure of hearing from our Domestic Violence Advisory Board. And so with that, I'm going to hand it over to Veronica Leonard, who is the chair of the Domestic Violence Advisory Board, as well as Elise Hamilton Childers, who is the Community Support Services representative for Mecklenburg County. So ladies, the floor is yours. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you so much for having us here today. I'm Elise Hamilton Childers, the Prevention and Intervention Services Division Director with the Mecklenburg County Community Support Services Department. So part of our role is providing the county's intimate partner violence services and providing staff support for the Domestic Violence Advisory Board. The Domestic Violence Advisory Board is a city and county board. So it has 6 seats appointed by the Board of County Commissioners, 4 seats appointed by City Council, and 2 seats appointed by the mayor. And the mission is essentially to monitor and report on what's going on with intimate partner violence related services in the city of Charlotte and Mecklenburg County, and to advocate where the board observes gaps in services, and to play a role in education and public awareness related to intimate partner violence. So I'll let Veronica talk more about what the board has been prioritizing in recent years and what she sees coming up under her leadership.
So again, thank you for allowing us to be here. My name is Veronica Leonard. I serve as the chair of the Domestic Violence Advisory Board. I am a survivor as well as an advocate. So in my professional role, I work for a global water technology company in WASH initiatives, providing clean drinking water to water insecure areas around the globe. I'm honored to be able to serve on the Domestic Violence Advisory Board. I'm a mayoral appointee. The Domestic Violence Advisory Board, we have a very diverse group that serve on the board. We have 12 seats that serve. We currently have 10 members. We have 2 seats available, and we will have another seat coming available in September as that member will be rolling off. One is a county appointment, and 2 will be city appointments. We have 1 current and 1 that will be coming up, just to let you know how we work. So as Elise was saying, our mission is to address the growing need for domestic violence services across the county as well as the country. There's a lot of things that are going on. I don't know if you've been paying attention lately. In the news, there's been a lot of domestic violence going on. So it's clearly a growing issue, not just here locally, but globally. So just a quick little detail. In 2024, CMPD responded to 25,000 calls for service for domestic violence. That increased to 37,000 in 2025. So that just shows the growing need for domestic violence services here in Charlotte, Mecklenburg County. As you're probably well aware, the population of Charlotte is growing at a clip of 157 people per day. So with that comes more demand for community services and public safety services. Domestic violence impacts the entire community. What goes on behind closed doors does not stay behind closed doors. Its effects extend beyond the home. It affects our children in schools, their performances. It affects our families. It affects our employers when people cannot show up to work due to court dates, issues that are going on, those types of things. So clearly it's a growing issue here in Charlotte, but it's also something that needs to be addressed because it does affect all aspects of our communities. I think I kind of covered everything. I know law enforcement officers, emergency responders, healthcare workers, educators, employers, social service agencies, they're all affected by domestic violence. This is a very big ripple effect that goes on in our community. The financial and emotional cost to our community is significant, but the human cost is even greater. It requires more than just law enforcement. It requires a coordinated community effort. I believe it's a big issue that not one program, one city, one committee can address. It's something that needs to be addressed from all angles. So what we would like to see is more city council involvement in supporting those initiatives, showing us what we can do as advocates in the community, what you need from us between connecting the victims and the survivors to the services that the city or the county wants to provide. That's the feedback that we need as a board so we can kind of bridge that gap between our community leaders and our citizens of the community. So that's kind of where we're at. So is there anything in particular that you wanted to know from us as a board that you would like to have answered?
Well, first of all, thank you for being here. And we want to deepen our engagement with our committees, and you all are the first to be here at our committee meeting, so thank you for being here. I'm going to pass it on to my committee members, and then I'll finish up. So I have Mr. Mitchell, and then I have Ms. Ajmer.
Okay. Thank you, Madam Chair. And first of all, Veronica, congratulations being a survivor. I know it's not, that's not easy. I have received more calls in probably the last 2 years about domestic violence in our role. And so I had to educate myself so I can give our citizens some direction. So first of all, on the 37,000, can you all provide stats? And here's where I'm going. How many are youth and under 21 domestic violence cases? Because I'm seeing a lot of it in high school now. And so I think that will help educate us. And then secondly, you know, based on your research, what are some of the causes? Is it, you know, lost job, alcohol abuse? So not now, but just that type of stats I think will help us, and we'll look at those 37,000. But here's the one question I do have, because going through the process, my frustration has been a restraining order that, okay, so you know I'm going it's only in effect for 1 year. And then if you don't renew it, then it goes away. So talk to us, do we need to have more legislative around the restraining order? And my frustration has been, talking to several victims, that the 1 year and lack of notifying them when it expired has caused a lot of emotional stress on some of the victims.
So I can speak to that as a survivor. I don't know the overall stats on that, but in my experience, a protective order did nothing to protect me. He showed up and was not arrested. And then, like you said, you have to go to court every year
Yes.
and sit there and again and again and again every year. In my situation, it was better for for him not to know where I was.
Okay.
I was safer that way because it was clear that he did not care what a piece of paper from the court said. So there's that frustration, and unfortunately, there are some services that are not available if you do not have a current active restraining order, protective order. We call it a DVPO here in North Carolina. So, I mean, those are definitely things that need to be addressed. I think there is legislation that definitely needs to be addressed when it comes to protecting survivors and victims.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Yes, thank you, sir. Ms. Ajmir?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. To the leadership of the Domestic Violence Advisory Board, thank you for your leadership and thank you for sharing your personal experience. I know that's difficult to do. Could you sort of walk us through what are the biggest breakdowns between the police, courts, and social services?
That's a question we could spend a long time on, but I will do my best to hit some highlights, and thank you for the question. Some of the breakdowns have to do with information and barriers to information sharing. Every one of those entities you mentioned, plus many more who operate in this space, use different data systems. There is no sharing of information across those systems between court, law enforcement, hospitals, victim service providers. And there are also a lot of legal restrictions intended to promote victim safety and confidentiality for good reason that also make it difficult to share the information that we may want to share across systems. So that can create some blind spots for people operating in different fields of expertise when they're trying to figure out what is in the best interest of the safety of the survivor and the accountability for the offender. When you're only operating with a small piece of information from a much larger picture, you're less likely to get it right. So that information sharing is a really big piece of it. Another issue is training. As you might imagine in this work, there's a pretty high turnover rate. The work is difficult and involves taking on vicarious trauma. And sometimes staff may not stay in the roles for a very long time. So having a robust and consistent training curriculum across disciplines is challenging. It's extremely important for promoting a consistent response across disciplines, however, that everyone is operating under the same definitions of domestic violence and intimate partner violence, the same basic expectations of what we prioritize in this city, and the understanding of each other's systems so that you know how to communicate with your multidisciplinary partners on these issues and what they can and cannot do. So that training is a big issue as well. And I'll pause there just for the sake of time. Those are just two that are top of mind for me.
You know, I appreciate you sharing that. I have to ask this because we are in the budget process and we have had several members reach out to us about the funding for Safe Alliance. In the past, the city has funded about $400,000 to Safe Alliance, and they provide victim assistance services as well as 24/7 hotline. Has the board taken a stance on that? I'm just interested in hearing your thoughts as we discuss the budget.
We actually have a board meeting tonight, is our May board meeting, so I'm sure it will be discussed tonight. We actually have had a couple of people that will be attending the budget meeting tonight, so they won't be at our meeting because they felt like they needed to be here for that budget meeting. But what I can tell you is that the money that is allocated to domestic violence is not enough. We constantly are short of resources. It's a growing problem, obviously, with our population growing, so I don't know if that information will help you at all in your decisions as you're addressing domestic violence, but I will be able to give you a further answer on how the board stands on everything after we meet tonight and we talk about it.
Okay, I look forward to hearing more. Thank you so much. I appreciate your service. That's all I have.
Thank you. Thank you both for being here and sharing the information. I would ask that you follow up with an email with us on some directives based on the work that you all have done as a committee, how you would like us to take action. Mr. Graham is our chair of our intergovernmental committee, and so if there's any if there's anything that we want to put on our state legislative agenda to advocate for, perhaps an extension of having that order back past 12 months, we can potentially put that on our legislative agenda. So any actions that you believe that as a council we can advocate for, would love to hear from your board after you meet this evening about what we can do, because we want to be a partner and we want to look like help. This is 37,000 calls.
That's just calls for service, yeah.
I mean, and to your point, what actions go uncalled, right? We have to do something about that. And I know we've invested in the Umbrella Center and things of that nature as a city, but we can take a more proactive stance on this. So we're looking, our ears are open, our eyes are open, we're looking for any information you can provide us.
So I can say that we do have a liaison from the Board of County Commissioners that sits in on our meetings. I would love if we could have the same thing with City Council.
Okay.
That would be able to attend our meetings. I know I spoke to Councilmember Owens at the luncheon for the, I'm sorry, just drew a blank, at the luncheon for volunteers for the mayor
Yeah.
a few weeks ago, and her and I talked about it, and I know she mentioned an interest. I don't know if that's something that you would be interested in, but we would love to have the City Council involved and love to have that feedback every month, just so you can sit in and hear what goes on in the meetings and what's going on in the community, as well as give us an option to come in and let us know when there's a time that would work for you for us to attend meetings and to give our input to the City Council, just so that you can be more involved. We would love to have that partnership and that involvement from the City Council side.
Thank you. I see Mr. Heath writing that down feverishly, so we'll follow up on that. Okay. Are there any other comments?
Meeting to adjourn, Madam Chair?
Second?
Second.
All right. And with that, let's adjourn the meeting. Thank you. Thank you all.